It was the beginning of fall in a small town just outside of Portland. The air had turned crisp overnight, and leaves painted in burnt orange and golden yellow fluttered down every street. I remember that morning vividly, not because it was extraordinary, but because it wasn't. I woke up in my tiny apartment above the bookstore I managed, brushed my teeth like I always did, fed my cat Bella, and sat down with a cup of lukewarm coffee and a long to-do list I had zero interest in tackling. At 27, I was convinced I had missed some critical step in becoming the adult I was supposed to be. My name is Emily Carson. I wasn't unhappy, exactly. But I wasn't thrilled either. Life had become a quiet routine, stitched together by emails, errands, and obligations. I told myself that was normal. Everyone felt a little disconnected sometimes. That's what adulthood looked like, didn't it? It wasn't until my best friend Lily called that morning that I sensed something was about to shift. She was breathless on the phone, almost laughing. "You need to get out of that apartment," she said. "I'm sending you a gift. Don't ask questions. Just be home around noon." I didn't argue. Arguing with Lily was like arguing with a summer storm. She always had her mind set, and more often than not, her plans ended up being exactly what I needed even if I didn't see it right away. At noon, a knock on my door revealed a man standing with a folded note and a thick envelope. Inside was a train ticket to Vermont, a week-long stay at a quiet retreat in the mountains, and a handwritten message that simply read, "Sometimes the soul needs a reset. Let the trees do their work." The envelope was signed not just by Lily, but also by my older brother Josh, my boss Margaret from the bookstore, and even my elderly neighbor Harold, who always brought me fresh tomatoes from his garden in the summer. All of them had chipped in. They knew something I didn't. They saw a weight on me I hadn't admitted to carrying. I left 3 days later. The train ride was long, but something about watching the countryside blur into forests and hills began to uncoil the tension I hadn't noticed had built up in my chest. By the time we reached the small town near the retreat, I felt lighter. Still unsure, but curious. The retreat itself was tucked away off a gravel road, surrounded by towering pine and maple trees. It looked like something out of a storybook: wooden cabins with mossy roofs, a lake that reflected the sky like glass, and the smell of wood smoke and damp leaves in the air. The woman who greeted me at the check-in desk introduced herself as Nora. She had a kindness in her eyes that made me feel instantly safe. She handed me a journal, a pair of soft slippers, and a schedule that included long morning walks, meditative tea ceremonies, creative writing workshops, and something called forest listening. I wasn't the kind of person who meditated. I barely had the patience to wait for pasta to boil. But somehow, by the end of day 2, I found myself sitting quietly on a mossy log, listening to birdsong, wind, and the occasional cracking branch as if they were telling me secrets I'd forgotten how to hear. There was no Wi-Fi. No buzzing phone reminders. No pressure to respond, produce, or perform. For the first time in years, my brain wasn't fighting to be anywhere else. One of the afternoons, we were asked to write a letter to our past selves. I sat with my pen hovering over the paper for almost 20 minutes before the words finally came. I told my past self it was okay to not have everything figured out. That it was okay to rest. That being strong didn't mean being invulnerable. I cried halfway through writing it, not because I was sad, but because someone finally asked me to say it out loud. By the end of the week, I had not only filled the journal Nora gave me, but I had also made 3 new friends, fallen in love with a quiet trail that led to a small waterfall, and learned that there's a kind of strength in stillness. I wasn't magically healed. But something inside me had shifted. A new root had taken hold. When I returned home, my apartment didn't feel quite so small. The bookstore felt warmer. Bella's meows were less annoying and more like a welcome song. I walked into Margaret's office the next morning and gave her the tightest hug I think I've ever given anyone. "I didn't know I needed that," I whispered. She smiled. "We did." I spent the next few weeks reintegrating into my life, but this time with more intention. I no longer opened my laptop first thing in the morning. I took walks, cooked meals from scratch, and started sketching again, something I hadn't done since college. I even volunteered to help organize a local art fair. For the first time in years, I wasn't just existing. I was participating. One Sunday afternoon, Lily, Josh, Margaret, and Harold gathered at my place for coffee and pie. It was something I initiated, me, the former recluse. We laughed over pie crust disasters and watched the sunset from the fire escape. I looked at them, really looked, and felt a swell of emotion that I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was love. Maybe it was gratitude. Probably both. I cleared my throat. Why did you all do that? The retreat. The tickets. The note. How did you even know? Josh leaned back and shrugged. You stopped humming. You used to hum when you were cooking or shelving books. Then one day, you just stopped. Harold nodded. And you always said good morning when you passed by. Then it turned into a nod. Then nothing. Margaret added, you were showing up, but not really here. You were always tired. Always distant. Lily, as always, put it bluntly. We love you, Em. We weren't going to sit back and watch you fade. I blinked back tears, suddenly overwhelmed by the quiet ways love had wrapped around me when I wasn't looking. I hadn't realized people were watching. I hadn't realized they cared so much. Over the next year, things didn't become perfect. I still had bad days. There were still bills to pay, shelves to dust, coffee to spill. But the difference now was that I didn't feel so alone in it. I leaned into connection. I made space for people. And I allowed people to make space for me. I even opened up a new section in the bookstore, a small cozy corner for journaling, self-help, and creative writing. We called it the Reset Nook. It became a favorite for locals, especially on rainy afternoons. Sometimes I'd find a note tucked between the pages of one of the journals, left by someone who had come in heavy and left a little lighter. One day, a young woman came in, looking exhausted and unsure. She browsed, hesitated, then came to the counter with one of the journals from the Reset Nook. I smiled as I rang it up. She asked, do you think things can really change? I looked her in the eyes, remembering everything, every moment from that first train ride to now. Yes, I said. Sometimes the people around you know what you need before you do. And when they do, let them help. Let the trees do their work. She gave me a soft smile, then left. I don't know where she is now, but I hope she found her version of stillness. Her retreat. Her reminder that she's not alone. Because I've learned that when people care, they don't always say it with words. Sometimes, they say it with silence, with presence, with gifts and plans and tickets. And I'm endlessly, deeply grateful. They knew what I needed before I did. And because of them, I'm finally whole.